All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Nuggets of Nothing podcast. I'm Delvin, and I'm joined here by my, as usual, partner in crime, JJ.
I guess I'm just here now. I guess I'm just part of this forever.
You don't have to be if you don't want to be.
We'll talk about it later.
Oh, God. This ought to be a good conversation. Anyways, last week we tried to record video. It didn't go well. I made certain that right now it's going to record and we're going to be doing just fine.
Hit my hand on the desk.
Guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to clap to sync everything up. Doesn't
So
really
do you
matter.
want to do an intro for a third time?
No, I do not.
No? Just
we're
going.
good.
Right,
we're going to
nice.
move forward with it. I can do it. I can make it work. So do you want to go ahead and go first for this week? Because my topic.
Do you want to tell people what the topic? Do you want to tell people what the podcast is about?
Absolutely not. If they're here, they know. If not, then oh well. No. We figured in 2020 now is like the perfect time for one to start a podcast. Two, to start a podcast specifically about learning knowledge, weird knowledge that we didn't know in an everyday lifespan. And really, we want to be able to bring that information to everybody and kind of maybe help them learn a thing. So let's see if we can't maybe do that. Off of that, JJ, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You started last week, so I can start this week.
Let's do it.
My topic's about cheese.
Ooh, cheese is delicious.
Have you ever heard
a big fan
of the product that is called government cheese?
Government cheese. Is it like government welfare?
Yes.
But for cheese?
But yes. Also, your cricket's back. Do you want to address the cricket?
I know.
Every podcast we try doing, there's a cricket involved, and now there's a cricket involved in this one.
There was a cricket in the studio. There's a cricket in my house. There was a cricket on the Can't Sit Still podcast in Alex's apartment. So crickets are just a staple now.
Episode 12 out.
Not sure what to do about it, but I'm gonna.
So
I just want to preface this. 1 second. I want to preface this by saying I haven't had a goddamn cricket in this house almost all year long. And then all of a sudden we start recording here or at our own homes. And sure enough, crickets just start coming out of the woodwork. Don't understand. Not just here, but over at Alex's place, everywhere. Crickets are just, they're terrible. This is a anti-cricket podcast.
They are relentless. And that's why I hate them.
I agree.
So my topic starts all the way back in the Carter administration. Jimmy Carter, really? Still alive, 95 years old. So in the Carter administration, there was a shortage of dairy products, which led to an increase on the market of upwards to 30%, over 30%. So it was getting pretty expensive. And so the plan was that he came up with, because he was a farmer himself, and he didn't just want to like bail them out per se, but he wanted to help the market, the farmers, and the government try and get a win-win-win scenario all at the same time. So the plan was over 4 years to funnel $2 billion into the market to help lower the price and get more product out there into the market so that it would eventually become self-sustaining. Simple plan. So what the government did was they just put out a flat rate. What?
That's a good band?
Oh, Simple Plan? No, Blink-182, idiot. Isn't that what we're talking about? They made the Scooby-Doo intro. What's new Scooby-Doo intro? Simple Plan.
That makes sense.
So the government was just like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put out a flat rate. We're going to buy as many dairy products as we could, looking more into buying things that that weren't perishable so fast. So powdered milk, butter, and cheese. Mm-hmm. And so, side note, what this kind of caused was cheesemakers were just like, cool, awesome. I'm just going to buy all this dairy, make a bunch of cheese, and I'm just going to sell the government my worst cheese at their flat rate. So the government then, so this worked. The price of the products went down. More products went into the general market, and it was working very well for the farmers and just the usual consumer. But when that happened, the government, in order to keep this going, bought all the excess. so the farmers wouldn't lose money. So this means the farmers were paying for all this just to get the market good. And then once the market was fine, they kept paying. And at this point, the government is buying so much milk product that it is becoming a logistical problem because they have to put it somewhere.
Okay.
So this spans...
Before you... Oh, 1 second. So that kind of happened this year where there was so much excess milk in the market that the only answer that they...
We'll get there.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
We can talk about that later, but don't worry. It gets... Modern times becomes involved.
Right.
So this spans over 35 states, and it is said that in Wisconsin at the time of the Carter administration, so 77 to 81, every single cold storage and warehouse in the state of Wisconsin had government cheese in it. Because government cheese, what they did was they took all this product, and they kind of found the easiest was to process this cheese in such a way that they add preservatives, cheddar, and a bunch of other stuff in it and make it last longer and still retain a kind of cheese taste. And so it got to the point where they were leasing and renting out caves in different states because they were like, we need a place that's temperature controlled that we can put a lot of cheese. And so they started putting it in underground caves because they were just so stockpiling so much of this stuff. The Washington Post interviewed a USDA official and asked them, what do you guys plan on doing with all this cheese? And the guy's response is probably the cheapest and easiest option is to just dump it all into the ocean. That's how much cheese we're talking about here. And I had no idea about this. I'd never heard of this before. And then I saw like just some video pop up on my YouTube page and I gave it a watch. No, it was on my TikTok. And then I went to their YouTube page and watched that. And then I was just scrolling through some of my podcasts that I listened to from Australia, and they were talking about government cheese. And I was like, I've never heard of this.
Look, it's big cheese. Right? Everybody knows the big cheese is behind everything.
Big cheese has a finger in every pot, or whatever the saying would be. That's not it.
For cheese, it is.
It's got its pin in all the inks. And so they just were like, might as well just get rid of it. Dump it in the ocean. They were just like, this is going to be a nightmare. Estimated 500 million pounds of cheese.
Do you think that does anything to the ecosystem in the ocean?
It would be very bad if you dumped in half a billion pounds of cheese into the ocean.
Yeah.
Ocean levels would rise. Miami's off the coast.
Well, that's what the problem is.
Because all the cheese
hasn't degraded, yeah.
So we're looking, and they're just kind of like, there's a little panic going, what did we do with all this damn cheese? And I just can't imagine I can, and also at the same time I can't. It seems so cartoonish that the government stockpiled so much dairy products to the point that they needed to do something with it. So they made it into cheese bricks. Usually it was 2 to 5 pound blocks. And then they had so much of it that it was over 35 states, 500 million pounds. So it was processed so much that it was later was like, it had the nickname of rubber cheese or plastic cheese because it was just so like bad in quality. The government, let's see, they had so much that they then started paying farmers to stop making it. That's where we got into the situation. They said we're going to pump some money into the market and to get the prices down and to get the product out there. Okay, now that it's back to normal, we're going to keep buying it a little bit just to keep it sustainable. Okay, now we have so much cheese. Please, here, take some money and stop paying it. And they did that by like buying their dairy cows and doing things with the cows, like making, just like butchering them. But
I figured it was the way
they just started buying the cows to stop making milk, please.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we enter
really.
What?
It's the only option.
Yeah,
really.
Honestly, what do you do? You can't just pull out at this point. You're going to cause a crash. So at this point, we enter the Reagan administration, and Reagan just sucks in general. I'm not a huge fan of Reagan. I'm a historian. For people who don't know, he was terrible. So beginning of the years of the 80s, there was a recession, and Reagan was just kind of nope. He just was hoarding a 500 million pounds of cheese at this point, and they didn't know what to do with it. And there was he put in some policies during the recession that would kind of help. This was kind of one of his platforms. He's like, I'm going to help the lower class and people suffering from this recession while at the same time cutting food stamps. And how do you do that? Well, I'm going to give you all 30 million pounds of cheese, which is just, it's a good chunk of cheese, but it's not enough to make a dent in 500 million pounds of cheese in cold storage across the country. So that was going to the elderly and low income areas, which I found out also on top of this. So at the time, especially in the Reagan administration, because Reagan hated minorities and he didn't care. So I did not know that 75% of black people are lactose intolerant. 51% of Asian people are lactose intolerant.
I didn't realize that.
And 20% of white people are lactose intolerant. And he flooded the market with cheese into the low income welfare neighborhoods and elderly neighborhoods. And
I was kind of wondering.
homes.
I was like, do you think that all of the people that are lactose intolerant are just like, this is great and all, like, thank you for the food, but this is gonna kill us.
What do I do with it? We're
just never gonna stop shitting.
So it's already hard to digest food because of how processed it is. So you give it to the elderly and they're like, great. And then you give it to low income areas, which in the Reagan administration, they were really not helping minorities very much. And so they were like, here's some cheese. And they're like, at best, half of us are lactose intolerant. We can't eat your shitty government cheese. And they did it, but they did it that way because they couldn't flood the market with 500 million pounds of cheese. So they gave it to this plan because they figured these people aren't going to be buying dairy products anyway. These people aren't going to be buying cheddar. They're buying necessities in order to make ends meet in meals. They're not going for cheddar. So we're going to give them cheese. And that way everything kind of stays intact. And a lot of people nowadays, and this went on for years, this turned out to be, that's how they relinquished all this government cheese, was through welfare programs. And a lot of people nowadays, a lot of the sources I was looking at had a lot of mixed feelings about it. There's kind of almost fond memories of eating it, while at the same time you had the feeling of humiliation, was is a lot of people said about it. But it is what it is. But the worst part of it is, it was so bad that the more you ate it, it got better. Like, people were like, the smell of this to this day would still bring back like stomach aches and bad memories. But in the zeitgeist of like rap culture, and specifically, government cheese is known for one specific thing. Can you guess what it is?
I don't think I could guess.
Government cheese is supposedly known for making the world's best grilled cheeses. People who eat it are just like, listen, it's shit. But you put that thing in between some 2 slices of bread, give it a tiny little splash of seasoning, and melt it down. It's the best grilled cheese you're ever going to have. Snoop Dogg swears by it.
And that he is a culinary master.
You got to be when you smoke that much weed. That guy's got munchies 24/7.
Figure out what you can eat, yeah.
Yeah, he knows his way around a grilled cheese. And so in the 90s, the market leveled out to the point where the stockpile went down. They didn't have to keep buying it. And so it slowly ran out of cheese, ending the welfare cheese programs. But flash forward to the future, in 2018, the stockpiles were started up again, probably for what you're mentioning earlier. If you want to go ahead and run through what you know real quick about the government buying dairy products.
Well, actually, I don't even know that this was about government buying dairy products, but really there was just so much milk out in the market, and the milk was worth next to nothing. It's the same thing that they did with the hog market. The hog market was next to nothing. So instead of selling hogs for slaughter, they just killed them and put them in the ground, because it was easier to kill them and put them in the ground than to continue to pay to feed them. So
should have just dumped them in the ocean.
Well, it eventually
put them with that cheese.
But eventually what they ended up doing with the dairy products is that they actually just took all the milk out and they were pouring it onto fields. Like, they were just pouring it on people's crops because of the protein that was in it. Because that's the reason you put urea on a lot of the crops, is because of the protein that's involved. And so that's why when you drive by some fields, you kind of smell a chlorine smell. That's because they're putting urea on the fields, because there's a heavy amount of protein to it, and there's protein in a lot of milk. It's a very cheap protein, but they poured a ton of it. Like if you go on the internet, you can find a bunch of like pictures of people backing their tank trucks up to like a crop that's on a hill and just letting it run down. Yeah. So and
I guess they've done that.
Was a pretty big heavy thing in a lot of the markets, actually. I mean, we're still kind of trying to. I mean, a lot of it had to do with COVID. So I mean, that's not really surprising.
So we're doing that with milk, just dumping it out.
Mm-hmm.
But they've started the cheese stockpile again, and it is up to 1.4 billion pounds of cheese.
Really?
Now, it is said that the 500 million pounds was enough to give at the time. The population has definitely increased. It is enough to give every person in America 2 pounds of cheese. Now there's 1.4 million pounds of cheese.
See, personally, I would love that.
I guess it's going back to the welfare system. There's also a restaurant that uses it.
Cheese and such.
Yeah, cheap shit.
Yeah, cheese and such. Where you get cheese.
Let me make sure I get the name of the restaurant.
40 different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, they just started. There's one actually in my town now. Wahlburgers.
No shit.
Mark Wahlberg's brother's restaurant uses government cheese to make their burgers.
I mean, if it works, it works. I mean, it could be any more processed.
Some way for the government to, I guess, get some money on top of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my topic. Something I found so interesting is just the lunacy of the Carter administration starting this genius idea to buy cheese, and then the Reagan administration adopting so much cheese that they had to come up with a welfare system built around the cheese.
Do you think this is the trickle-down economics that Reagan was talking about?
It's the cheese-down economics, yes.
Yes. What he's talking about with the trickle was with the melted cheese trickle down the economy.
Yeah, he was putting it on top of nachos, so that's you guys just didn't get the message.
Yeah, you guys all thought it was stupid, but really it was just about, a big plate of nachos. It's great.
You guys are the idiots.
Yeah, not us. We knew. We didn't know. We don't know anything.
So government cheese.
Well,
what's your topic, Melvin?
If everybody that's listening now, or new people that are possibly going to listen, last week we had a topic about you were talking about gene mutations, and I had brought up the idea of CRISPR. Well, I found something out about CRISPR that I found to be very interesting, where over in China, there for the first time was a successful CRISPR gene mutation that stopped a child from being. It was impossible for them to become HIV positive. And
that was that. I heard about that months ago in the news cycle. That the first baby who was immune to HIV was born, or something like that.
Yeah, well, and the reason was because it was done through CRISPR, and it was just recently found out. And this person that has done it is now facing jail time. He's facing severe jail time.
Oh.
And the reason being is because CRISPR is a very strict thing. Well, as we kind of talked about it the other day, it's like
the huge moral gray area.
Yeah, it's the huge moral gray area. It's the first step into eugenics, more or less. Custom building. It's build a baby, and
designer babies is what people call it a lot.
Yeah, and that's a serious issue, and because it's such a serious issue, there's a lot of heavy rules and regulations. This guy did it without, for one, really having a lot of knowledge over how the CRISPR gene mutations actually worked. And like the biggest issue that they brought to light in his trial was you don't necessarily know what this gene mutation is going to be able to do for the line or the lineage to come. You could have changed.
He's just free-handed CRISPR.
I mean, he had a little bit of knowledge to it. He just didn't have a lot. Like, he didn't stop and think about the genuine long-term consequences of if you change a baby's genes to be able to be immune to HIV, what does that do to their genetic makeup moving forward? And so because of that, that was like a big, serious issue. But you have children that are now immune to HIV, which is, pretty big. The next argument was that he did these with babies that he had no clue whether or not they would or would not ever become HIV positive. And to me, that's not really much of an argument when you stop and think about it. because you just went from saying, well, you never know if they're going to be HIV positive to, you know, for a fact they're not going to be HIV positive because they're immune to it.
Go out and have as much sex as you want, unprotected.
That's the goal. I mean, you can get HIV other ways, but yeah, that's the goal. But the long term, he's looking right now. I think what it was for him, because he was the main assailant. He was looking at up to 10 years in prison. Some of his other
Seems like not
assailant,
that very long for messing with baby genes.
I mean, he's also never going to be able
China,
to get a
right?
job.
So I don't even know.
Yeah,
I don't know the Chinese justice system.
Yeah,
you say that. I bet some government, like American government, swoops in and goes like, "Hey, first day out the jail, you want a job?"
Well, that's what I was about to say. He's never going to be able to get one in China ever again. They've pretty much all but written him off now, because there's just no way that they're going to ever let that. And that's actually a big concern that community has, is that since he was able to do it and it was a success and he didn't think of the ramifications and everything that came along with it, they're afraid that another country is going to try to poach him out and, you know, tell him that he, you know, to come over and work on them for like other genetic mutations to be able to kind of help. More or less, they're worried about almost like a World War II situation, part 2, which I guess would just be World War III, where you would have another person trying to create perfect human beings and having this whole thing, which really that's the long con, because they're not going to be perfect up to 18 years. That's a real long time to have to wait.
Man,
unless you just
insane.
change the rapid aging. But the other assailants that he had with him, they're looking at like minor jail time, but they're just looking at a lot of fines. Like, I think the first one was a little over 1 million yuan, I think is what their currency is called. And that's $430,000 US. And then the lesser assailant, the guy that just kind of, I don't really know exactly what it is that his like whole thing was, but I guess there was somebody else that was, I guess, just like a computer tech for him. He's looking at having to pay, I think it was a little over $150,000 US, or 430 yuan. Or no, 500.
No kidding.
Yuan. Yeah, and so there's like the biggest problem is that they're just worried that this is going to lead into further possible genetic mutations. That, I mean, it's almost like, and this is really a simplistic version of it. When you go deer hunting, sometimes you see a deer that you're just like, yeah, you're kind of mutated and you're not how you should look. If you keep going, you're just going to keep ruining the gene pool, and that's a major issue. So it kind of becomes kind of a weird gray area for everybody. And this is the gray area you're talking about, in the ethics of, is it right?
Because you could use it to go, you could say, oh, like, I can make sure my baby isn't born with like this disease or this disease that would have been chronic throughout their entire life, and also it's hereditary, so they're gonna get it. But also at the same time, someone else could go, yeah, but I want my kid to be blonde,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, okay, one of those seems a lot better than the other, obviously morally, but it's still, no matter what, it's still the same thing. I also have a CRISPR is an acronym. I have what it stands for here, if you would care to know.
Yeah, go for it. I did see that
clustered
it's like Go. I'm sorry.
Clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. I don't know any of those words.
I don't know really either, but my assumption would be is that it's just them
it's out there. There it is.
Shit, and it lining up to be a specific line of DNA to be able to, to pull out what you don't want and keep in what you do.
I picture a giant machine with like lots of tiny needles.
That's kind of what I imagine too, like right at the embryo stage.
But I know that's probably
I know
moronic.
Yeah, it's not really, but I do kind of imagine where you just kind of like have two little pincher hands, like pulling strands out and then like rearranging them to put. Yeah, and then it just relines them all up, and it's like we pull out the ones we don't want, and the ones that we do, we just put.
You cut them and you fill them in.
Yeah, it's kind of like what they did.
Type of rubber cement. There you go.
Yeah,
Dinosaur CRISPR.
Dinosaurs. But yeah, so that's kind of where it is on my. And you know what? I'm going to take a weird stance here. I don't know how ethically wrong it actually is to just want to be able to say, I want my baby to have blonde hair. Other than the idea,
I know.
Like, I want mine to look this
way. You're just going to push superiority and probably even more race relations than there is now. But I am of the opposite stance, but I know that I am not adequate enough in explaining it to actually have a good, off the top of my head, to have a good argument, like a rational, like coherent argument. So I'm going to pass.
That's a good call. Now, what I would like is if somebody does have something that they would like to try to, say to us, please leave it in our comments. For one, comments really help everything.
Did you set up a Twitter yet?
Huh?
Did you set up a Twitter yet?
That's
promised at the end of the last episode.
That's a funny question that you asked that. I did do that. And you know what? I'm going to be a man of my word. So as we're talking right now, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to have everybody see that I'm going to do that. And you get to see my screen.
Look at his look. Find the reflection. Get the password. You had me rolling last week when I texted you because you uploaded the Kansas Still podcast and you put it on YouTube and it had everything still in it. You cut nothing. And I just texted you and I'm like, hey man, why'd you leave all this stuff in? Because I was like, well, maybe it was like just an editing choice and he wanted to leave all this ranting in. And then you were like, I'm really glad you asked. I messed up. Just as simple as that. And I was like, great.
Yeah, it's funny.
Are you wearing your ring?
I am wearing my ring. Well, yeah.
Well, you're not married.
Doesn't matter. I'm practically married.
Weird.
I've been with my fiance longer than you've been with your wife. I'm counting it.
I mean, okay.
Yo, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm
not. Wrong. You're not. But if you want to, go for it.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I want it.
I mean,
okay. Everybody's seeing my internet right now. How bad it is.
What?
Because it's taking me.
With how long it's taking to load.
Yeah.
This? Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it later when you're not.
See that I'm starting
doing a video call.
Yeah, you see that I'm starting.
You're using a lot of bandwidth right now.
I really am. Long story short, if anybody has any information on CRISPR, we would definitely be interested in hearing it. Because I mean,
it's definitely an interesting conversation.
It is. I would think if you want to be able to just say, I want my kid to have blonde hair, if I want my kid to have blue eyes and maybe like a little Hitler stash whenever he first comes out, that'd be kind of cool.
Oh no!
I heard this thing.
Do you think they could make a baby's mustache follicles active that soon?
I don't. Well, at this point, the world's limitless. I couldn't begin to tell you what they can and can't do.
True.
We don't even know what most things can and can't do. I mean, like what was it 80 years ago? Traveling to the moon seemed impossible. Is 80?
Oh yeah,
probably roughly about that.
Yeah, I mean, we went to the moon in 69.
Yeah, so it seemed practically impossible. It seemed impossible that we were going to be able to drive a long time ago. So really, I mean, we have no fucking clue what is and isn't possible. So we might have some babies walking around here with some like Hulk Hogan mustaches going on. That'd be pretty cool.
Straight out the womb, they're walking around. Those calf muscles are fully developed.
Do you think eventually we could just have babies that are just fully grown coming straight out? Just pumping them out like soldiers.
That's gross. That's gross. I don't like that.
Yeah,
like soldiers. They come out, you indoctor them with like some knowledge, and then you hand them a rifle, and then they're born.
Yeah, he's
it's like Bender from Futurama. Like Bender from Futurama is actually like 3 years old.
God, could you imagine? That'd be fucking terrifying, wouldn't it? But yeah, no, I don't see any issue with being able to. But now, where I would kind of go would be like, we're not gonna choose race. Race isn't happening. It is what it is. That one's staying not touched at all.
Well, people claim on the current path of where we're going, most people in the future will be like beige, like kind of like how they there's an old South Park episode about time traveler immigrants, and how everyone from the future comes back from the past
yeah.
to work and then put money in their bank account for their future selves, and how they're all like the same, like weird, like race, like a mixed race and a different language. That's kind of how they like actual sociologists see like the future will definitely become more of a melting pot when it comes in terms of race.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that one bit. I mean, it kind of eventually makes sense. One of two things is going to happen. One or two things is going to happen. Either we're all going to come together and accept it, or we're all eventually going to kill ourselves. And it's not really going to matter. It's pretty deep.
My
for an
wife's
ending.
sitting over there for anyone who's watching the video. I didn't just say hi, I love you to the wall. My wife.
No. He's talking to himself.
Race.
No. Yeah, different races and non-existent.
I'll tell you later. You haven't been paying attention. She doesn't know what happened.
Jacob, stop talking to the wall.
Stop, Delvin. There's no wall there. There is a wall, but there's also a person.
Yeah, it's a broomstick with a head on the top.
If she wouldn't be furious, I'd pan the camera.
Anyways, I think we're good. We're gonna go ahead and.
I think we're good. I think we both learned something today. I didn't know your thing, and I guarantee you didn't know about government cheese.
I've never heard of government. Although, once again, I'm not surprised because the government tends to step in a lot of market. For as free market as they want it to be, it's only as free as they want to let it be. That's kind of the issue.
I am not very familiar with business and stuff like that. That's not nothing I've ever really put too much effort into my education. So I did not know how much the government interferes in stockpiles cheese.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's the other thing too. That too is like think back to the housing crisis in 2008, which caused a
were they
massive
stockpiling
recession.
houses?
No, they were just really over. I don't necessarily know how to explain it in a perfect way. More or less, the housing market was in a giant bubble. It just kept going up and up and up, and that was because people were lending out mortgages for whatever. I mean, you could practically have just woken up or strictly been straight born, lived for maybe a couple hours, apply for a house, and you would have got it because they were just.
That's what those CRISPR babies are going to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, they more or less just were just not regulating anything at all. And so they were just like, yep, you're good with a mortgage. And then everybody just crashed. And because the crash happened, the government had to step in with the banks and was like, yep, we'll give you as much money as we possibly can because if you go under, everything goes under. So the famous line to it is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so that's why they were like, if we bail out big businesses, it's going to be good for everybody if we do that. So that's why they always do it. And that's why you're kind of a little bit seeing the opposite right now with they're trying to help people more often now because they say, well, that's the goose, we're the gander. If we help them, they can help us. And that's what's trying to happen. That's like the biggest thing to think of business. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, me and you got to go to Wahlburgers sometime to try this cheese.
I'm interested. I genuinely think they're just like, it's just like those craft singles. I bet that's what it is, but like really big singles. Just
yeah, and maybe
singles.
If they've built a whole restaurant chain off of it, it can't taste bad.
I don't think when you eat a burger, is the cheese the thing that you're really taking? Well, with you're just taking in sustenance. You're not actually tasting it. But if you're normal people, when you're eating a burger, is the cheese the thing that you're really tasting? I don't think so. I think it's more about the burger itself. I think that could be some straight ass cheese on there, and you would still be able to sell burgers.
You could hide the flavor. I don't know, maybe. Well.
All right, let's call it quits.
We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you next week. Not only are we going to see you next week, I'm going to make the Twitter as soon as we get off here. I swear. I swear that I am.
Communication.
Jacob's going to watch me do it. He's going to make sure it happens. But until then, see you everybody next week.
Thanks.